All right, here we go. It's 2 p.m. Right now here in Kiev. Let's get started. Honestly speaking, I'm incredibly daunted, but also incredibly grateful for this opportunity to be here as a Ukrainian, as a neurodivergent person, as a woman, after all. I think I have something to share, to offer to the global neurodivergent community. But at the same time, I honestly feel very scared. English is my third language. I'm incredibly nervous while speaking in public. After all, I'm multiply neurodivergent. I have ADHD, I'm autistic, and I'm dyspraxic. So I'm pretty much used to the idea of many things uh, uh, that can go wrong whenever I do something in public. Even when I want to share something about one of my special interests, something especially dear to my heart, I am constantly aware of the potential for failure. So please bear with me. As you already know, I'm a literary translator, and I'm also autistic. I believe these two facts are inextricably connected. After all, while a lot of autistic people think in pictures, I actually picture the world in words. I have been able to read since before I can remember myself. I literally can't remember a time when I wasn't able to read. The written word has been my faithful companion for pretty much all my life. And I can even say that words are my special interest. What we can do with words, namely morphology and syntax, grammar, books where we can put words in, etc. So it shouldn't be surprising that I chose arranging words as a career. And indeed, working in publishing in general and especially translating books is an actual treasure trove of special interests. For instance, there's my special interest in languages and especially grammar. My interest in books as physical or digital objects. In fact, when I was considering this career as a schoolgirl, I took into account the fact that I can get especially desirable freebies. Those brand new books few people in the world have read before me. And that's not even taking into account other special interests that can be satisfied through particular books. For instance, history, human origins, actually neurodiversity, and the like. As I got older, I also developed a special interest in fantasy, namely fantasy in English-speaking countries. This is especially fortunate as English is the primary language I work with. So I get paid for pursuing multiple special interests simultaneously. Isn't that a dream of many autistics around the world? Besides that, literary translation is a particular sensory-friendly job. I mostly work from home, so I can arrange my workplace to my liking, avoiding whatever triggers drain me the most. For me, for instance, these are auditory and tactile triggers. So I don't have to be in a noisy office all day. I can safely work in my room in whatever position I like, and importantly, I don't have to stick to fixed working hours. This is especially fortunate for someone who is prone to hyperfocus at work. For instance, I can translate whatever I wanted to translate in a day, and then go on to translate some more text just because I feel like it. Or I might think I haven't spent enough time with this particular book that day. And no one is going to interrupt me. Of course, hyperfocus is not always beneficial, but I'm trying to self-regulate and develop some strategies not to overexert myself. Mm. And mm, I've discussed some of the more obvious implications, and now on to some lesser known autistic traits that influence my work. For instance, it has been said that us autistics have heightened injustice sensitivity. Well, to be a literary translator in Ukraine means to combat injustice. Our culture has been disproportionately shaped by literary greats, and literary translators also happen to be largely included into the fold of literary greats. And translation has always been almost as important to Ukrainian literature as original books. And of course, writing in Ukrainian and translating in Ukrainian has meant fighting colonialism for a long, long time, and it is still so. The war my country is at right now is also a war of cultures, a war on Ukrainian culture, and that includes book publishing. You have probably seen the harrowing videos or photos from the destroyed printing house, which happens to have published some of the books I worked on. notably The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, which I translated and which didn't get yet another printing because of this tragedy. On the other hand, much as I'm chagrined by events like that, working means combating this injustice. The more I translate, the more I write historic wrong, which of course is incredibly stimulating and motivating for me. And last but not least, I mostly translate fantasy fiction these days, which aligns with one of my special interests. And fantasy fiction, especially the books written in the last few years, often tend to include prominent neurodivergent coded characters. Of course, fantasy words don't often even have the language to describe neurodivergence, but the signs are often very recognizable. For instance, I'm incredibly flattered to see Farah Malchin in the first Slow trilogy combat a big bad empire as a warrior woman and as an autistic person. Well, not just autistic coded, but autistic since it has already been confirmed by Joe Abercrombie himself that Farah is, in fact, on the spectrum. I also enjoy the exploits of Elizabeth Kent of Dark Rise fame, who looks and behaves like baby Alice Bridgerton. Another character who is widely speculated to be autistic. I also adore Poppy and Sarah, created by Jennifer Armentrout, who has ADHD herself. So I have no doubt that there is a reason why Sarah and Poppy both fidget so much, say things at random, and are so prone to snap decisions. Wonderland, Fantasyland, they're for everyone, including us neurodivergents. But how exactly my neurodivergence influences my work? Well, as it is widely known, many autistic people are good at analytical thinking, good at systemizing. I've always seen language and particularly grammar as a system. Even at school, I noticed patterns in grammar, both morphology and syntax, that nobody tended to discuss and few other people tended to notice, which helped me become proficient at the languages I studied more quickly. And of course, grammar matters in everyday communication and in written text. So I often find myself explaining why I made this or that decision based on the intricacies of grammar to an editor. Communication with editors can be difficult, but not when I'm sure of The details are glimpsed and base my decisions on. And one more thing autistic people are known for is bottom-up thinking. I also tend to see a multitude of details, of particularities before the whole. The thing is, I tend to see the details of a particular text and synthesize them in my head very quickly. I tend to be quite fast at translating, as long as I know most of the words in a text or sentence. And I quickly assess the rest. A multitude of factors influences a translation, even if a shorter sentence or phrase is translated. For instance, grammar, stylistics, phonetics, and the context. I have to assess not only the sentence in question, but also the surrounding sentences and passages, so that there are no unwanted repetitions, and take into account the semantics. Have I chosen the correct synonyms? Haven't I repeated myself by accidentally saying the same thing twice with a different wording, etc. But most importantly, I enjoy that. I've always seen the word in words. It is to such an extent that I sometimes even see a string of written words before my eyes when I listen to someone or take in a scene. I can think of something while picturing my thoughts as a written text, or picturing someone else's words as a written text, which can both be distracting and incredibly stimulating. Sometimes my brain even uses this as a survival mechanism. For instance, I have recently had a very unexpected, very nasty shutdown when I was exposed to a lot of sensory triggers, got overwhelmed, and eventually stopped pursuing pretty much everything around me, including spoken words. But shortly before that, I pictured the words everyone said around me as written text, and that was soothing. Well, for a time. The shutdown did kick in after all. Mm, also, mm, well, also, particular texts have particular demands and challenges. For instance, fantasy fiction is replete with meaningful names and words that denote things that exist in a particular imaginary world, in a particular fantasy setting. I have to invent my voice for all that while taking into account the stylistics of the words, the meaning, even length, and how they sound. Sometimes I have to remember actual set expressions, turn to phraseology to translate a single word. For instance, in The Name of the Wind, one of the books I have translated, the protagonist lives in a rural town called Ur. It is the name, of course, is similar to Nowhere, which is almost explicitly referenced in the text. However, I believe the Ukrainian translation of this novel is pretty much the only one that takes that into account. I decided to look for a particular set expression corresponding to in the middle of nowhere in Ukrainian and run with it to transform it into a place name. I chose "На краю світу", which literally translates into English as "at the edge of the world". And shortened that so that a believable two-syllable place name comes out. Another challenge for any literary translator is dialogue, especially friendly banter, which Romantasy is especially known for. For a person with particular severe social and communication deficits, I'm surprisingly fond of translating dialogue, especially witty dialogue, friendly banter between characters, because it is always dynamic. I always have to play the words back in my head. It is as if I'm watching a movie or listening to a podcast. Not only do I picture the written text in my head, but I also can almost hear the words the characters say, especially if they are particular ironic, wry, jocular. I do enjoy a good joke as much as everyone, and translating humor brings me particular joy. I also tend to incorporate my other special interests in my work. Not only can I translate books that require a knowledge of certain history to truly grasp the context and what is left explicitly unsaid in the text. For example, I have recently translated The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon, where there is a collective noun for a group of ghosts, spool. The English language is, of course, notorious for having a plethora of group nouns for living things that are seldom used but still exist and are homonymous with relatively common English words. Well, we can add a spool to them. However, I had trouble fitting the Ukrainian word for spool, putushka, in the text, especially in the dialogue. So I turned to another one of my special interests, namely crocheting, and remembered the word motok, which is Ukrainian for skein of yarn in particular, and used this word to translate spool in this context. And particularly enjoying was the fact that it made translating the word spool as a verb much easier. You see, people with superpowers in the world of the bone season often tend to gather ghosts and spirits into groups, spools, for their own ends. This is called spooling, and they say they spool spirits. The word namotot, which has the same root as motok, has proved particularly useful in this context. And translating meaningful names is probably one of my favorite aspects of fantasy translation. Sometimes I can tell a meaningful name when I literally see one. When I first opened my file with From Blood and Ash by Jennifer Armentrout, I noticed how the protagonist of the novel is called Poppy, same as a big red flower. I thought there is a reason for it, and well, there is one. Poppy actually turned out to be a nickname, and the second novel actually references the fact that Poppy is named after a flower, which is even associated with her. So I found the word makivka, which translates as poppy flower in English, to render her nickname. I had my concerns, of course, because makivka also means the top of one's head in Ukrainian, and a water lily flower. I thought people might stumble upon it. It may cause some people to giggle. Well, not really. The only complaints I've ever encountered is that the nickname was translated at all. Well, sometimes I do think alistics are weird. For instance, they don't really believe nicknames should be translated. Sometimes I may alter the text not rather than translate it literally, because I have to take some other factors into account. For instance, I can sacrifice semantics for phonetics. In The Wicked King by Holly Black, one of the protagonist's detractors ironically calls her Pretty Betty Jude. I so like the sound of it that I decided against translating this phrase literally. I choose the phonetically similar Mila Smila Jude, which back translates into English as nice or pretty, brave, or rather bold Jude. Well, both things are true for this particular character. Jude Duarte is as petty as she is bold, and Milan's fans love her for it. Of course, being autistic in translation is not without its drawbacks. Chief among them for me is communication, or rather miscommunication with editors. For instance, I had to convince my editor I absolutely have to translate that Pretty Betty Jude as Mila Smila Jude. And she absolutely has to live this phrase that way. Sometimes I fail to get my point across. Sometimes the much discussed double empathy problem kicks in, and some actual drama ensues. I can't always grasp the editor's intentions in communication correctly, and sometimes I assume hostility where there is none. On the other hand, I'm often afraid of coming across as overly hostile myself, which I'm actually prone to because of emotional dysregulation. Sometimes I think I have emotional regulation issues stemming both from my autism and my ADHD. It's as if they influence and strengthen each other. So I don't even have to communicate using mouth words to get an actual meltdown. And when I have a meltdown, I'm typically not the only person to suffer. This, of course, influences my work as a process and as a result negatively. Thus, I'm incredibly grateful to all the editors who actually get me, those who tend not to argue, those who tend not to disrupt a perfectly good text, not to fix something that isn't broken with unnecessary edits. I'm also grateful to people who can recognize their errors and be forgiving to me. And of course, there are also editors who are neurodivergent themselves. Those tend to get me most of all. Communication with them is not without its pitfalls, but in general, we tend to have particularly rewarding experiences working together. Another one of more pervasive problems in my work is executive dysfunction. After all, I also have ADHD, so I have trouble actually getting work done, getting as much work done as I have to without being distracted. And I sometimes also have trouble setting priorities. Ukraine's translation industry is booming right now, despite all odds. So I get a lot of offers from pretty much every publishing house in the country. Sometimes it's especially difficult to turn down a tempting offer. And of course, it has always been difficult to me to say no or to negotiate with publishers to work on my own terms. Thus, I currently have an extremely busy schedule. I have my whole life planned around translations for month ahead, and I have to literally work double time to get all the things done. However, I don't complain. This work also tends to be incredibly stimulating to me. It's incredibly stimulating to encounter prose so beautiful it hurts. It's stimulating and satisfying to translate some particularly tricky play on words or find a substitute for a meaningful name. In fact, one of the highlights of my career, in my opinion, was the translation of The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, where I actually let my imagination run wild because Suzanne Collins once again given direct proof to my fan theory, because I'm also a long-time tribute, part of the Hunger Games fandom. So my fan theory is that children in the districts, but not in the capital, often named in honor of their parents' occupations, probably as a manifestation of professional pride, professional identity. For instance, I believe there is a reason why the daughters of a forager and healer in the main trilogy are called Katniss and Primrose. Most of the tributes in the Hunger Games featured in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes also seem to have meaningful names like that. Of course, they are not always obvious because Collins seems to have altered some common words associated with particular occupations and industries. However, I believe my analytical thinking has let me detect everything she has hidden. So I translated those names. So whenever I sensed it is actually an altered noun associated with a certain industry. For instance, Mason, name of a kid from District 4, which is known for its fishing industry. Looks like it has been given to that particular kid on purpose, because missing is part of a ship. So I used the Ukrainian word for missing, bizan, to name this young man in the Ukrainian translation of the novel. However, too much stimulation is not always good. I have learned that the hard way. Sometimes even the choice of getting things right in a book can backfire, can be draining. There is such a thing, even for me, as too much work. There is such a thing as overstimulation by good prose. I have recently translated We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Faisal, and I have often found myself overstimulated by the beauty of her prose. I have drank it in actively only to find myself exhausted in a matter of hours, day by day by day. All the while, I had to grapple with the nuances of her style. Here, the friendly or not so friendly banter of the characters to render it properly. And of course, adapt myself to the particular visual style of Faisal, who is also a talented designer, and well, it shows in her fiction as well. I won't say I'm actually a fantastic, but I do have hypophantasia, so I have trouble visualizing things. I can provide a verbal description of things all right, and I can comprehend written descriptions of things, but picturing things in my mind is something else entirely. I'm actually quite helpless when it comes to finding places, even on the map, or when a map is readily available. So sometimes, when I merely translate descriptions of certain locations, it can backfire as well. It can be draining. I can lose my way. However, I believe my strength influence my work much more than my weaknesses. After all, translating fiction is largely a solitary occupation and sensory-friendly one. So I tend to avoid my triggers and my challenges most of the time. And when I actually have to face them, it is not about what it is not about my actual work. It's never about the books. Books rarely drain me. Books are actually more a solace, a comfort. And well, I believe A person with a special brain like mine also translates in a special way. I love the fact that I can transport into different worlds and become other people, sometimes unlike me and sometimes just like me, to experience adventures I couldn't even imagine in my fairly mundane life. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I have so many stories to tell, and there's actually a reason I've asked explicitly for permission to share them. All right, you may begin. Questions?
I have a question. Hello. First of all, thank you for your good talk. It was very inspiring and also informative. Could you tell me, please, uh, which which book gave you the most was the most troublesome to translate, and why?
Well, I'd say most of the books I have worked on have come with their own challenges. Sometimes so as little as a single word can trip a translator. Mm, um, for instance, so while translating Dark Rise by C.S. Beckett, uh, I couldn't decide what to do with the word remnants, which is used to denote the minions of the big baddie. For like, I don't know, not even weeks, months. I didn't like the word, the Ukrainian word for remnant exactly. So I wanted to look for a partial synonym. It's only after an aha moment close to the deadline that I chose the word seed, which is more often translated as a trace, a trail, or a mark. I believe it conveys the idea that these minions of the Dark King are kind of marker he leaves on our world, kind of trail people can know him by. And I believe no one has ever complained about that.
Thank you.
Maybe something else?
No, currently no questions.
All right. There are no other people willing to come up with questions of their own, so we can call it a day. Good luck. I wish you a happy Neurodivergent Pride Day tomorrow. Bye. See you next year.